Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The city reported 5,162 new COVID infections, up slightly from yesterday's tally. Among them were 272 imported cases. 11 more COVID patients died. Meanwhile, the condition of one infected toddler has improved, while the 5-year-old girl who suffered brain inflammation after contracting COVID remains in intensive care. Jacqueline with details.
The latest COVID-related fatalities were aged between 60 and 97. 7 of the 11 deceased COVID patients did not complete the 3-dose vaccine course. One of them was an 88-year-old who had a history of diabetes and stroke. She tested positive on July 23rd via a rapid test and was prescribed antiviral oral drugs. Early this month, she tested COVID negative, but still had symptoms of fever and coughing. After seeking medical attention at a private hospital, she was transferred to Ruttenji Hospital. Despite having a low viral load of COVID, she continued to have difficulty breathing before eventually passing away. Authorities warn patients should see a doctor again when COVID symptoms persist, even if they're taking oral COVID drugs.
Some patients may say they have taken the oral drug and they may want to wait and see. The oral prescription might be able to deal with COVID, but they may have other complications.
Meanwhile, an improvement in the condition of the 27-month-old COVID-infected toddler. He required intubation after having croup, a potentially life-threatening inflammation of the larynx and windpipe for children. His condition has improved from critical to stable, and he no longer needs to be on a ventilator. The infected 5-year-old girl who developed brain inflammation is still in critical condition and under intensive care.
Please bring your children to take the vaccinations as soon as possible, because we have observed increasing number of serious as well as critical cases of the children.
An outbreak erupted in a ward at Two Moon Hospital. 9 patients and 5 workers there have come down with the virus. Eastern Hospital also saw an emerging cluster at the ward with 7 patients and staff members infected. 11 more care homes also reported new cases. Jacqueline, TVB News.
Secretary for Health Lo Chung-mau says Hong Kong has a plan to restore normal life and restore international connections based on targeted measures rather than non-specific rules such as social distancing measures. Timothy Lee reports.
With the recently introduced 3+4 quarantine arrangement for air passengers arriving from overseas in Taiwan, is Hong Kong relaxing its anti-COVID measures in order to make it easier to connect with the rest of the world?
If you consider the population of...
Speaking on TVB's Straight Talk program, Secretary for Health Lo Chung-mau says the city's approach is now based on targeted measures rather than non-specific rules.
I have to emphasize, 3+4 is still equal to 7. So we haven't relaxed, we haven't cut down anything, but we are more precise. This is like precision medicine. Now in medicine, I'm a doctor, we want to treat a disease. We obviously want to hit the bad thing, the cancer cell, for example. So it's like the target therapy we have now.
He refused to provide a detailed roadmap, as he says the coronavirus could mutate any time.
But on the other hand, I must say, we do have a plan. Our plan is to increase all those more specific and more targeted measures and try to reduce the less specific, like the social distancing measures.
Lo also revealed that arrivals from Western countries have been far more likely to be infected with COVID than arrivals from Southeast Asia, including foreign domestic helpers.
Looking at the arrival figures, the average is about 4% positive rate. But if you look at the Western countries, especially Europe, France, Germany, the positive rate is as high as 8 to 9%, much higher. And whereas the Asian countries, you look at Philippines, Indonesia, you'll be surprised. The positive rate is only about 1 to 2%, much lower than the Western countries. Reason? Well, maybe the PCR test, the accuracy, maybe it's because during the 48 hours between the PCR test and the departure, their living conditions, whether they go out to a bar to have a drink, whether they wear the mask. I was told that in the Philippines, especially the domestic helpers, because they're coming to work, they're very conscientious. They don't go out.
Low says he hopes visitors from other places will adopt this approach to reduce the risk of infection. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
A female security staff member died after being crushed by a gate that collapsed at the Yau Ma Tei Maternal and Child Health Center. An engineer said the gate probably lacked proper maintenance.
The metal electric gate concerned was still at the scene this morning, with the main entrance blocked. Officers from the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department and Labour Department were deployed to the site for investigation. Visitors had to come through another gateway. Some say the area where the gate collapsed was one that visitors must pass by. This mother said she felt uneasy after learning about the incident, especially when holding her baby. This father said, "I think the gates will be fine after repair works." The Maternal and Child Health Center opens until 5:30 p.m. on weekdays. Sources say the gate collapsed on the woman when she was closing it at around 6 p.m. yesterday. The gate is estimated to be 5 meters high and weighs about 600 kilograms. Industrial accidents involving falling gates have occurred a number of times in the city. Back in 2008, a security officer at Taipo Industrial Estate was severely injured after a 3-meter-high metal gate fell on him. And in 2018, 2 construction workers were seriously injured by a 6-meter-high metal gate at the entrance of a site in Kai Tak. An expert said last night's accident might be related to poor maintenance.
I think this is the shortage of maintenance. The sliding gate is hit the limit position, so that the gate flow or to hit the security. For this gate is 3.5 meter height. I think we should keep away the gate about 3.5 meters. When you open the gate, you got control system. So it's a lot necessary to be very close to the gate.
After the security guard was hit by the gate, passers-by helped lift it off her. The 43-year-old was unconscious when she was rushed to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but she was certified dead at midnight.
More than 150 civil servants in the city were dismissed over the past 5 fiscal years for serious misconduct. That's according to a paper submitted by the Civil Service Bureau to the Legislative Council. Between 2017-18 and 2021-22, formal disciplinary actions were taken against 1,124 civil servants over serious misconduct or criminal conviction. Last year, 51 civil servants were sacked. That's almost 1/3 of the 155 government workers fired in the past 5 years. Some 70 staff members refused to sign a declaration to uphold the basic law last year. Nearly 60 people failed to pass their probation in the past few years. The Civil Service Bureau has promised to take more resolute action against misconduct by civil servants. However, lawmaker Dominic Lee said the numbers were reported in LegCo 2 months ago, and he slammed the authorities for failing to make improvements. Elsewhere, the Chinese vessel Yuan Wang 5 docked this morning at Sri Lanka's southern port of Hambantota. The scientific research ship's movements have raised concern from India, which fears that China could use the port as a military base. The Yuan Wang 5 was welcomed by Sri Lankan and Chinese officials at the port. The vessel is now expected to berth for only 3 days to stock up on fuel, food and other essentials. According to Sri Lanka's foreign ministry, the two sides have agreed the ship will keep its identification systems on. It also says the vessel will not carry out any research activities while in Sri Lankan waters. The ship was originally set to arrive last Thursday, but Sri Lanka asked to postpone the docking until after further consultation. Security analysts say the Yuan Wang 5 is one of China's latest generation space tracking ships. They are used to monitor satellite, rocket and intercontinental ballistic missile launches. Today, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the Yuan Wang 5 conducts oceanographic research activities in accordance with international law and common practice. A spokesperson said the activities do not affect the security and economic interests of any country. Australia's Labour Prime Minister is seeking to make political capital out of his predecessor taking on ministerial roles, unbeknown to some MPs and the public. Anthony Albanese said that Scott Morrison had undermined democracy by appointing himself to 5 ministerial posts during the pandemic. Morrison has defended taking on the role, saying they were a safeguard during an unprecedented time. He added that, in hindsight, these arrangements were unnecessary. But the move has caused some concern in Canberra, with Albanese now taking legal advice from the Solicitor General.
This is a sad indictment of not just Mr Morrison, but all those cabinet colleagues of his who sat back and allowed this to happen. It's undermined our democracy. It's an attack on the Westminster system of parliamentary democracy as we know it. And not just Mr Morrison, but others who were involved in this need to be held to account in the former Morrison government.
Russia's defense ministry said an ammunition depot had exploded in Crimea as a result of sabotage. Earlier, there were reports of a fire at a transformer substation. The blast follows an incident last week that took out planes at a Crimean airbase. Matthew Bray reports.
Russia's defense ministry said there were 2 casualties from a series of explosions in Mayskoye. A fire caused by the ammunition detonation is out, apparently. This is video of an electric substation on fire nearby the town of Zankoy. The back and forth over the nuclear plant of Zaporizhzhia goes on. Russia has accused the UN of blocking a visit by IAEA inspectors. A spokesman denied it was thus.
First, the IAEA is a specialized agency that acts in full independence in deciding how to implement its specific mandate. Second, the UN Secretariat has no authority to either block or cancel any IAEA activities.
He added that both Russia and Ukraine need to agree that IAEA people can visit. So far, that has proved a fruitless exercise, with shelling around the plant ongoing. A trial is taking place in Donetsk involving Britons, a Swede and a Croatian accused of being mercenaries. The men were caught around Mariupol in Ukraine and face possible death sentences, but are now somehow on trial in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic.
I was detained in Ukraine by the Russian Federation, nowhere near the DPR. In a vehicle together, which I was driving, we drove up to a Russian checkpoint where we were taken out of the vehicle. We had weapons pointed at our heads and we were detained by the Russian soldiers.
All 5 deny the charges. The trial is set to continue in October. Foreign governments don't recognise the DPR. 1 person was killed and 6 were wounded on Monday when missiles struck a residential area in Kharkiv. The missiles came from Russia's Belgorod region, according to the Kharkiv regional governor. This is Russian President Vladimir Putin told participants of the Moscow International Security Conference that the United States was trying to drag out the conflict in Ukraine. He also said Western nations were seeking to extend a NATO-like system to the Asia-Pacific region. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Celebrations and protests in Kenya after announcement of the presidential election result. Russia unveils a model of its planned space station. And proposed legislative amendments to tackle the problem of abandoned vehicles. Welcome back to TVB News. Kenya's Electoral Commission chairman on Monday declared Deputy President William Ruto the winner of the country's presidential race over 5-time contender Raila Odinga. Still, Odinga is expected to challenge the outcome of the ballot, potentially plunging the East African nation into a period of political instability. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The chairman of Kenya's Electoral Commission said William Ruto received about 50.5% of the vote to Raila Odinga's nearly 49% in the presidential race. However, just before the declaration, 4 of the 7 electoral commissioners told the press they could not support the opaque nature of the final steps of the electoral process. Odinga's campaign alleged that unspecified electoral offences were committed and that a winner was illegally declared without a quorum of commissioners. Odinga and his allies now have 7 days to file a challenge in court. Kenya's Supreme Court will then have 14 days to rule on the matter as violence broke out in parts of the country following the result. Any such process could extend political uncertainty in Kenya, which with a population of some 56 million people is seen as crucial to stability in East Africa. The challenge is likely to be Odinga's last chance to become Kenyan president, having run unsuccessfully for the post on 5 occasions. The 77-year-old long-time opposition figure has the backing of outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta and is largely viewed by the public as being part of the political establishment. 55-year-old Ruto, meanwhile, emphasized his modest background on the campaign trail. He vowed to tackle issues such as rising prices, lack of job opportunities and corruption. Kenya has a history of election disputes that have resulted in violence. Over 1,200 people were killed in clashes after its 2007 presidential vote. More than 100 people were killed in 2017 after the Supreme Court overturned the results due to anomalies in the voting process. That vote was eventually won by the now outgoing President Kenyatta. Daniel Roell, TVB News.
Russia's space agency unveiled for the first time a physical model of what a planned new Russian-built space station will look like. This has prompted increasing speculation that Russia is serious about its plans to abandon the International Space Station due to diplomatic tensions with the West over the war in Ukraine. Russia's National Space Agency, Roscosmos, presented a model of the planned space station, dubbed ROS by Russian state media on Monday at Army 2022, a military-industrial exhibition outside Moscow. Roscosmos said in a statement that the new space station would be launched in 2 phases. The first phase would see a 4-module space station start operating that would later be followed by a further 2 modules and a service platform which could accommodate up to 4 cosmonauts and scientific equipment. The head of Roscosmos has said Russia will quit the International Space Station after 2024. NASA says it has not yet received official confirmation of Russia's planned withdrawal. Back locally, a government campaign against hygiene black spots in the city has found many abandoned motorbikes in back alleys. The Transport Department is proposing legislative amendments to address the problem, with offenders possibly facing imprisonment in future. Timothy Lee has the story.
Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration Warner Chuk earlier said the government had not dealt with the problem of abandoned vehicles in back alleys because of a legal gray area. According to road traffic regulations, if a vehicle does not have a valid license for 2 years, the owner will be given a notice letter. If the owner does not renew the license within 15 days, the vehicle's registration status will be cancelled. However, if the vehicle is abandoned by the owner, authorities will not and cannot pursue the case. To plug the loophole, the Transport Department has proposed several legislative amendments. They include requiring owners to renew their vehicle licenses, or cancel their vehicle's registration, or get an exemption from the department's commissioner. The owners will be fined or imprisoned if they do not comply. The department hopes the measures will reduce the number of abandoned vehicles. Commissioner for Transport Rosanna Law says the proposed course of action is meant to address the existing loophole. Law also says vehicle owners should look for car scrapping services on their own and not depend on the government for the final disposal of their vehicles. The Transport Department will submit the proposed amendments to the Legislative Council in the second half of the year at the earliest. It's hoped that the measures can be implemented as early as 2024. In the meantime, the department will continue to remove abandoned vehicles from public areas. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
4 individuals have been charged with keeping a vice establishment involved in prostitution at an unlicensed massage parlor in Wan Chai. Former Director of the Police National Security Department, Frederick Choi, testified in court as a defense witness as the trial continued today at the Eastern Magistracy. Choi, who visited the parlor last year, said he had visited the premises 4 to 5 times and was inside a room with a young woman during a police raid. Choi said he did not receive sexual services and does not think the massage parlor offered sexual services. He left the court after giving evidence for about 15 minutes. Meanwhile, the other 4 defendants did not testify, and the case has been adjourned until the 23rd of September. 2 former Cathay Pacific flight attendants charged with breaching COVID home quarantine rules in December continued their trial today. They visited Moon Palace restaurant in Kowloon Tong, which later became the source of an Omicron outbreak. 45-year-old Wong Yun Leung and 44-year-old Nilson Lau were taken to the Eastern Magistrates Courts. The prosecution questioned why Wong left his Sheung-wan home to go to Lau's home in Tuen Mun, saying that was an unnecessary activity. In defense, Wang said he was out to buy lunch and give a gift to Lau along the way. The prosecution said Cathay allowed returned flight attendants to go out to exercise or buy daily necessities during the 3-day home isolation, but visiting friends was not part of the exemptions. Wang said the guidelines didn't exclude such visits and also defined necessary activities as those key to maintaining physical and mental health. The trial was adjourned until next Friday. That's the news. Thanks for watching.